Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming to class. I really appreciate it. We had quite the runaround again with the classrooms. We weren't sure which one we were going to have. Well, today we have yet another math department building. So very grateful that the numbers all added up together for that. Let's see. Well, we're not going to use the dot cam today. That's a new one, huh? That's new for me. So this morning I had gone over in my first class some material that, and some of those students, if I see you, look, welcome back. I'm glad to make it twice, you know, you guys earn a gold star, I'll tell you what. Wanted me to go over this material yet again. So I figured, let's do that. I'm going to speed through this though a little bit. I'm going to go real fast today because we have a lot of material. I have a whole nother lesson right after this one, so bear with me, folks. But basically what we were talking about this morning after we went over the scenes, and don't worry, it doesn't matter if you were there not to see the scenes. You can always catch up on Canvas, and even outside of that it doesn't matter because we went over some screenwriting theory, like the stuff we were doing before. So here we go. This is what I like to call NEUROCINEMATIC theory, right? This is all about how the brain works and how it's incorporated with good storytelling. Good storytelling, heavy-hitting stuff. So that's what we're going to do, folks. We're going to jump right into this. Now, the core principle of this concept is that of which is the human brain does not respond most strongly to information. Okay? Just got to get that squared away in your head as we continue on here. The human brain does not respond most strongly to information. Our human brain responds rather to emotion, to uncertainty, and really to pattern and to memory, right? And meaning. Right? So our storytelling, when you're writing a script, it works. This works using this map, if you will, because it aligns very nicely with you know, how our brain naturally functions, right? Our brain is processing experience, and that's very much what we do when we're writing a script, according to my curriculum, right? And it stores memory, right? The brain stores memory, and that's very much, we set up our scenes to do that. And our brain also is wonderful at resolving uncertainty. So, you know, when you're writing a script, keep in mind, think of your brain, right? And think of your audience's brain, right? You want to get into the mind of your audience while you're writing the script. You're foreshadowing, right, if you will. So another thing to touch on that is emotion over logic, right? Our brain functions in that of which we process emotion faster than rational thought. It's science. Okay? Emotional centers activate first in our brain, and logical reasoning always comes after. It just always comes after. And so, you know, if a script explains first, then it's going to fall flat on the ground, right? You know, it's like someone behind you giving you a flat tire. You're going to get flat tire. If we write a script and just explain everything, it's just going to feel and fall flat on the ground. Rather, we need to write a script that makes you feel first and foremost, and then it becomes memorable, right? Because we're talking about patterns and memory here. Our style of writing is prioritizing emotional state over explanation. We prioritize the emotional state over explanation. And this, of course, allows our audience to feel before understanding. Okay? going to keep our audience engaged. Not only going to keep our audience engaged, but immediately, right? Instantly. And and it's going to internally activate them, right? Our audience now is going to be internally active because of the way we are doing this. People don't remember what they understood. No. They remember what they felt. You know? Like when you're a little kid and let's say grandma's in the kitchen making food, right? You know, you don't remember that you understood her making food. You remember what you felt from that sweet old mama making you dinner, right? That's what you remember. You don't remember the understood, boring details. That's not important to you. Not at the core. Not at the core. So this then goes into this thing called the curiosity loop, right? Our brain is wired to resolve uncertainty. Okay? When something is incomplete, our brain sets off signals and our attention span increases. Our attention increases. Right? It's just the way we're wired as human beings, as I've said many times. Okay? And it has a name. It's called a cognitive tension loop, is what it's called. Right? And so when we're writing a script, we act the same way as this cognitive tension loop. We're going to withhold the full information, and we're going to have fragments of meaning, right, scattered around. And we're always going to delay resolution, right? Because that's naturally just how the brain operates, and that's how we want to write. We want to write as the operations of your brain. Okay? Our audience is going to lean forward mentally with this kind of subject matter. They're actively going to try to complete the story in their mind as they're watching what you've put on screen for them. Okay? And remember, as I referenced in our last class a day ago, I think it was the other day, too much clarity in your writing can be boring. Too much clarity is boring, right? Explanation. It's too much, over-explanation. But too much confusion creates disconnection, right? So you want to avoid those two things. Because the brain stays engaged when it's trying to solve something, right? So that's what you want to go after when you are thoughtfully making the picture. Okay? Let's look at pattern. Let's look at pattern recognition and meaning. Humans constantly search for patterns to create meaning. Okay? So when we're writing, a lot of what we do is we repeat themes in different forms. We use visual and emotional echoes throughout. And we create subtle connections across scenes. So the whole thing is weaved together like a perfect little spider web. Right? And it's perfect. It's perfect for our audience because then they start to recognize patterns and they start to form deeper interpretations of what's going on. Let's see, I'm going to go right here. And it gives them the feeling of a sense of discovery, right? Very important. If the audience has nothing to discover when watching your picture, you failed. Okay? Meaning that is discovered always feels more powerful than meaning that is simply just told verbatim. Okay? When the audience connects the dots on their own time, by themselves, really, the meaning becomes personal. It becomes personal to them. It's theirs, right? And that's what we want to go for. We want them to be able to take a piece of what we're giving them and they get to have it forever. They get to have it forever. It's intimate. It's an intimate way of going about things. So let's look more into the science now. Let's look into the what we call mirror neurons and empathy. Say that 10 times. But yeah, there's this thing called mirror neurons. Okay, and it's a function in the brain, of course. These mirror neurons in our brain, they activate when we observe others experiencing something, right? It's kind of a bad analogy, but monkey see, monkey do. I mean, right? And that can be used in a positive light, even though it has a lot of negative connotation to it. So, we internally simulate emotion, behavior, and sensation, and so we want to stimulate those things, right? And our style of writing emphasizes the presence over explanation, right? And another thing is we use silence. We use silence and stillness and good old-fashioned human behavior. And another thing we do is we avoid over-directing emotion. We give the tools to the audience, but overall it's up to them to, pick whatever emotion they want to attach to whatever interpretation they have of what you're making. Okay? The audience loves this. Okay? They feel what the character feels when we write like this. They experience the moment internally, inside. Okay? For example, a character is sitting in silence. That scenario, right? A character is sitting in silence, imagine. Okay? That can be more powerful than a monologue or a big, elegant speech, if you will. The brain doesn't just watch the story, folks. It participates in it. So we ought to write like we know that. Okay, let's go into the next thing. Trauma, memory, and fragmentation. Okay? These are things just in basic life. What is the brain function of anything to do with trauma? Well, traumatic events or intense experiences are stored. They are stored emotionally, non-linearly, and in fragments. Okay? As I said this morning, you go to any therapist and you ask them, and they will tell you that trauma is so deep inside of us that it actually can affect us physically. Okay? Because it's stored information. And I'll say it again, as I said this morning, if you don't think you have trauma, well, you've gotten trauma in the womb before you were born. Okay? That's just a fact. Go type it in. So, anyway, right? So that's important that we always write with that in mind, right? The trauma and the memory and the fragmentation of the whole thing. This works great as a style of writing. Okay, it reflects fragmented perception, and it uses non-linear feeling. And, my favorite, it avoids clean emotional resolution. There's no clean emotional resolution to trauma. Sorry, it's just not how it operates. Okay? This works wonderfully. Okay? These things work wonderfully because they mirror how people actually are, right? It's how people remember. It's how people process. It's how people carry experience. The real memory is not clean. So real storytelling shouldn't be either. Right? We want to write like this is real life, guys. We got to write like it's real life, even if it's a fiction story. Because we want to relate to the human being who's going to watch it. My goodness. Let's go back into the silence. Right? Silence has a lot to do with this function in the brain that's called the default mode network. Okay? And what that is when external input slows down inside your brain, our brain enters this reflective state, and that is called the deep the default mode network. Okay? And what's happening in this process is self-reflection increases, internal thought activates, and meaning deepens. Okay? And that's why writing with that in mind as well is incredible. It's incredible, right? So when you're writing, use silence. Use silence. Have slow pacing. And always allow stillness. Okay? The audience stops consuming when they are faced in these moments. And they start reflecting. Okay? When nothing is happening externally, everything is happening internally. Okay? Now let's go to tone shock and attention reset. This kind of has something to do with the tone shift, if you remember the shift tone. Our brain works in this beautiful way where sudden changes in tone trigger attention spikes. Okay? So when you're writing, always shift from one thing to another, maybe calm to chaos. Maybe there's a scene where it's very dreamlike. Throw it into a more grounded, tangible position. Okay? Let's say you have a scene where it's showing beauty, right? Throw a disruption in there. Okay? The audience is going to take this well. Okay? It's going to jar them. It's going to stir them into re-engaging instantly, as we talked about earlier. It's going to up the emotional impact. And it's going to make the moments, again, memorable. Okay? The brain wakes up when explanation is broken. Okay? Here's expectation and explanation, right? The brain wakes up when its expectations are completely decimated, broken. Okay? Now, this little guide of storytelling works absolutely incredibly because it really gets to the core of how humans feel, it gets to the core of how humans think, and it gets to how humans remember. Okay? Just know this. You are not just telling a story. You are working with the audience's brain. As I said in the very beginning, you are guiding emotion, attention, and memory in real time. Okay? You're working with the audience's brain. And it's a fragile and beautiful thing, and you should very much approach it with absolute care, even a little caution, and be very precise. Because it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So let's go ahead and go into my next little spiel I got for you guys, now that we went over that again. This is another part of my advanced script writing theory. And I call this transcendental story theory, okay? And it's really using script writing as a spiritual transmission. Bear with me, those of you who are not very spiritual. I swear you'll get something out of this by the end, okay? So let's go back in time. Let's go way back when, right? Before modern film, stories were not created for entertainment. Let's say that again. Before modern film, this is way back when, before TikTok. Before TikTok, okay? Stories were not created for entertainment. They were created for survival. They were created for identity. They were created for healing. They were created for meaning. Stories were told since the beginning of time around fires, across generations, through myth, through folklore and ritual. You investigate all these other cultures around the world, you can see this very clearly. Because these stories carry a spiritual weight. In today's modern day and age, we have a serious problem. And you can find it in just about any new script out there. Not all of them, but most of them, okay? Most scripts today, they explain too much, right? They over-explain. And therefore, it then feels constructed. It just feels constructed. Human beings know other human beings, so you can see right through whoever you're next to, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all the same people on a very deep level, okay? And so there's a lack of depth of meaning. There's a lack of depth of meaning. And so, return storytelling to its original purpose is my, that's how I do it. I have written so much at this point that I've figured out that what all part of what I do here is I'm returning storytelling to its original purpose, okay? To transfer experience, wisdom, and emotional truth beyond language. Okay, let's say that again. Return storytelling to its original purpose. Okay, it's meant to transfer experience, wisdom, and emotional truth beyond language. Okay? So, let's talk about that. How are we going to make a story as a spiritual transmission? How are we going to make a story as a spiritual transmission? Well, this is how. A powerful script does not just communicate information, it transmits something deeper, right? A feeling, a realization, a shift in perception. Okay, let's do a little more compare and contrast, right? Our modern storytelling and the things that you see on Netflix and Peacock and Hollywood in general, their approach is very much that of which of, this is what happened, right? And what are you left with that? I mean, what do you even say to that sentence? This is what happened, period. It leaves no room for anyone watching to even think of wanting to make an interpretation of their own personal volition. No. The right way to go about it, folks, is spiritual storytelling. Okay? This is what it feels like to exist within this truth. Okay? It's a far better way of going about things. Right? Let's do this, right? Modern storytelling, this is what happened. Spiritual storytelling, this is what it feels like to exist within this truth. So, let's go into how the transmission works. And I will jump into that in just a moment. I'm going to take a drink of coffee and I'm going to check my Zoomers here. Our Zoom class was pretty good this morning. We caught it right in the nick of time. I don't know how we're doing today. Okay, yeah. We got about 5 more minutes before that goes bye-bye. And verily, I tell you, it will go bye-bye. So let me go ahead and just put a little 5-minute, well, I can't take too long. Okay, that's all right. Well, let's just break down this for a little bit here. Okay. So how does transmission work, right? How's this transmission working? Well, as we kind of said earlier, it's experience, right? Experience leads to emotion. Got an old-fashioned chalk here. This is kind of nice. Probably can see it better on the Zoom screen. I don't know. But then, this goes into our audience and their internalization. I need a better piece of chalk here. Oh, let's go with the yellow. There we go. Which then leads to deep, deep reflection. Okay? So this is how the transmission works. Experience leads to emotion, which gets to our audience's internalization, which then leads to their reflection, inevitably. That's how the transmission works. That's how spiritual transmission works when you're writing. Okay? A great story is not understood immediately. It is processed. It is taken in over time. Right? Wisdom is not understood immediately. It is processed over time. Well, the same thing with a great story. A great story is not understood immediately. Okay? It's processed over time. Because this takes time to go from experience, to gain the experience, to feel the emotion, to have the internal realization, and then to finally go to reflection. That takes time, baby. You can't do that in 1 hour. And that's okay. That's the way it works, right? And so you're leaving your audience with some good tools. Also writing a hell of a story. So hopefully you guys got that. I'll reiterate it one more time just in case the Zoomers didn't see that. But yeah, we go from experience to emotion to the audience's internalization, and then we go to reflection. Internalization, sorry. Experience, emotion, audience, internalization, and then reflection. There we go. Sometimes I jumble up my words. It is an evening class, so bear with me. Okay? Great story is not understood immediately. It is processed over time. Just like anything, really, in life. So let's look at the transcendental states in a story. And again, let me check my zooms. Let's check our Zoomers. Oh, okay.